Welcome to the Shaping Portsmouth podcast. Shaping Portsmouth is a collaboration of key Portsmouth businesses, transforming Portsmouth together. Hello and welcome to another Shaping Portsmouth podcast with me, Dave Humphries, and today I am joined by Matt Foster, founder and CEO of the Parenting Network. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, Dave. Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, no, really good to have you here. We're in obviously, as people know, we're in a rival charity hub at Spark Community Space, which another great place, a bit like what we're going to talk about in terms of what you're doing and the Forge project in a little bit. But let's start by finding out a bit about you, Matt. I think the vast majority of people that listen to our podcast probably know you, know who you are. But for those that don't, tell me a bit about yourself. You originally from Portsmouth?
Yep. As the saying goes, Pompey born and bred. In Paulsgrove, council estate up north of the city. Grew up there in the 80s and sort of moved down onto the island in the 90s, really.
Yeah. And so, again, people will know you from the Parenting Network, but your journey prior to that involves some other third sector organisations. Has your career predominantly been third sector?
It has, yeah. So, in fact, actually, I think we've jumped the gun a little bit in our socials over the last year or so, but I've actually dedicated about 25 years to the third sector in Portsmouth this year. But yeah, my life has predominantly been working for the benefit of others, and that's mostly come about from my own lived experience in my own past, in my childhood, and in my early teens. And so it was quite a natural progression for me, really. And I'll happily explain a bit later on a crossroads that I came to where my life was going to go one way or the other, really. And that was in 2004. But yeah, it's been a journey, and to be where I am now, I feel immense privilege to be in the position that I'm in, whereby I have started in a challenging, difficult life, where I wish I could go back to that child and tell that child everything was going to be okay, to then spending a long career working to support others, to now being the leader of probably the most influential third sector organisation this city has.
Yeah. I think there's no doubt about that, and I think it probably is quite a remarkable story, and something that I think I've mentioned in podcasts previously around sometimes the strongest things are built on the hardest of foundations, and there's this pattern between the experiences people have early in life that really influences what they then go on to do. And you've already alluded to that, and I think yours is very definitely one of those cases, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I never knew how much of an impact my early life was going to have, really. And a lot of processing my early life has happened in recent years, as a professional, as a dad, as an adult. And in the beginning, going into work in the third sector, I didn't connect all the dots. I didn't work out why I was doing that. And over these years, I've been able to figure it all out. Growing up in a household where my birth father was out of the picture. I've never met him. I don't know him. And then there was a very flawed stepfather, very narcissistic, very abusive, very intimidating and bullying, who pushed me out of the scene very, very quickly. And I won't go into details of what that life was like for me, but it meant a lot of times being locked away. It meant a lot of time being, at a young age, locked out of the house. Everything was always pointing towards, you're not welcome. Every interact, every sort of putting foot wrong, walking on eggshells, every response was, get out of this house. Yeah. So everything was telling me you're not wanted all the way through my childhood, all the way through my adolescence. And the funny thing is, I didn't feel hard done by. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong with that. I didn't know better. That was to me was what family life was like. And I wish I could, I wish I could go back to that child now and say to that child, this isn't okay. This isn't what it's like. But what was happening was the social workers and the youth workers and all those people that I was meeting through getting involved in groups at school and so on, they were becoming those positive role models in my life.
Yeah.
So of course I went into that kind of work. At the time, I thought it was just chance because I was looking for work, and I ended up working in Havant as a youth worker in about 2000. And at the time, I just thought it's work. I'm doing it because I didn't really know what I was going to do with myself, really. And that was great work, and it was a great place to kind of cut your teeth for the third sector, really, working with lots of vulnerable families, lots of kids who, were disengaging with education there and things, and we were up at point 7, and it was a really vibrant hub, and the youth services up there were great. It was led by a lady called Liz, and one of the team here from Spark, actually, Sandy.
Right.
And that's where I first met Sandy, who's a lovely lady. And I spent a couple of years working there. And unfortunately, you may remember in sort of like early 2000s, sort of maybe 2002, something like that, Connections suddenly came around, and all of a sudden, all the funding was going towards them, and funding to the youth service was cut,
Yep.
and my hours were cut. And what had happened is by that point, I had started to get quite settled. I had a good relationship. Her family had taken me in, and I was seeing for the first time what a healthy family looked like.
Yeah.
And my hours were cut, and I kind of spiraled a little bit, and quite rightly, and unexpectedly, that relationship ended. Really, I wasn't bringing the energy to that relationship that it needed, and so I was again kind of rejected, and it triggered everything again because it's like, no, I finally found this, and it's gone. And I found myself in a bit of a mental health breakdown into depression. Found myself no fixed abode, homeless again. Tried to go back to my own family. Very quickly realised actually being on the streets was far better than the alternative of staying with them. And this was now 2004, and I found myself at a bit of a crossroads. So I had a job application in for a homeless hostel in Fareham, but at the same time, I also had a housing application in that same hostel as well. And so, depending on the decisions that were made out of my control, my life was going to go one way or the other. Luckily, I got a position, and I started working in this homeless hostel in Fareham, and started to pick my pieces up again and rebuild my life. But that was a new start for me. That was a new beginning, and it was a point where I was learning resilience at probably my most broken point. Actually, I was really, really broken. It wasn't quite an easy climb back up. I found myself subject to some workplace bullying as well. It's kind of like I've always said, abusers, they can sense, they can work out the people that are a bit vulnerable. And there was a very narcissistic Scottish has nothing to do with the fact that he was abusive, but he was a very strong Scottish personality, and he was mean. He was really, really mean to a lot of people, but particularly me, because he decided that I didn't deserve this spot of being employed in this hostel whilst he was away on some sort of sabbatical and then come back. And so I was, those first few years were terrible, but I stuck at it. I learned resilience because I knew I couldn't go backwards. I couldn't end up being back on the streets again. I couldn't not be employed again. I had to just endure. I had to grit my teeth. I had to go through this, and I did for many years, until eventually coming to work at the Portsmouth Foyer in Portsmouth, and I stayed there for 9 years, and it was some of the best years of my life. Whilst I was there, family started. We had Evelyn. It was a great team. If any of those old Portsmouth Foyer staff are listening, hello to you all. If any of the young people are there, I love you all to bits. You were all great, as chaotic and as mad as you were. The Portsmouth Foyer taught me to deal with just about every situation a young person could encounter.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had everything from substance misuse, self-harm, suicide attempts, people having printing presses for money in their wardrobes. We had floods, we had fires, we had people sneaking people in and hiding them under beds. We had everything every single night. I could sit here and I could tell you stories all night, David, about the things that went on, and it was so good. And so, yeah, I'd found my place. I'd found my tribe. I was loving it. It was great team of people. But what had happened during that time, whilst I'd now found the workplace that I wanted, I'd found the team that I'd wanted. I had a partner, and I became a dad in 2011 to Evelyn. But what that did is, all of a sudden, loads of feelings of that rejection and abandonment, that parental rejection, that neglect, that abuse, that I thought wasn't really a thing in my head. I'd obviously, something in my head had just pushed away and wasn't dealing with it, wasn't processing it, came flooding. And it was very cliche, but my partner was also suffering with a bit of postnatal depression. So I was feeling a lot of responsibility to care for my two girls.
Yeah.
And at 3-4 in the morning, I'm sitting there holding my daughter in my arms. She's finding her lungs, that new baby things when they start doing all that. And I found myself promising her that I would be the dad that I never got.
And I suppose that's what I'm quite intrigued about, actually, is you're saying that, because you said that suddenly becoming a parent was quite triggering, but clearly you've had an experience of being parented that's had quite a significant impact on you. How do you think that shaped the parent you then became?
So there's a saying that I say a lot. I don't own it. I didn't make it. I don't know where it came from, but it's, be the person you needed when you were young.
Yeah, like that.
And I don't know whether I was already aware of it and subconsciously seen it, but that was what I was saying. That was my mantra. That was what was being said to me. I had no measure of what good parenting necessarily was, apart from the brief time in a relationship where I had seen what parents were. And I didn't at that point have all the answers. I'm not a perfect parent even now. But I knew what I didn't want to be. I knew what I wasn't going to do. I knew that at that point I made the decision, although I didn't have a problem with drinking, I've struggled with things in the past, some addictive kind of situations. I had a love addiction at one point. I think that was stemmed from the fact that it was very devoid in my young life. There was a bit of problems from gambling and things in my during my ups and downs and my life being very chaotic and things. I think my nature kind of took me to those things. From the moment my child was born, I've managed it now. I said, right, that's it. I'm not going to be drunk ever again. I'm not going to take drugs ever again. I'm not going to gamble ever again. I sound quite boring now, don't I? But I was never going to be in a situation where if my daughter needed me, I wasn't going to be there. I was going to show up. I was going to be there. I was going to make mistakes. I was going to fall down. I was going to own those mistakes. And I was going to be communicative with my daughter and very transparent and honest. And every single day I was going to tell her that I loved her. And I was always going to play. I was always going to be playful and make it so that she knew that, and another saying is, and I think it's a meme somewhere probably. I wanted to be the kind of dad where my kids would go, "Oh crap!" Don't want them to go, "Oh crap, my dad's going to kill me." I want them to say, "Oh crap, I need to call dad."
Yeah.
And so all these kind of things were shaping me around that really. And at that point, Dad's Club hadn't really come into my head. It was a very personal thing at that point. It was, okay, I need to be the best version of me I can for this daughter. I'm still working at Portfolio, got a good job. And for a little while, that was all it was.
And this is what people might not realise, because they might just see Dad's Club as a sort of bolt on to the parenting network, but it's actually the other way around, isn't it?
It's the origin story.
Dad's Club is the origin of the parenting network, and you know, already I can see where this story's going and the why.
Yeah.
So how did that kind of launch you into setting up Dad's Club then?
I'm sure many people listening will know that parenting turns your world upside down. I thought I was quite an emotionally intellectual person. I thought I knew what parenting would be like. I'd read all the books, I'd downloaded all the apps, I'd done all that kind of thing. And it's nothing like what you expect. You could be the most prepared person in the world. And many people here listening will understand that it's also can be very isolating, and especially for dads.
Yep.
And so I found myself in this situation of being a new dad, not really having any dad mates. Typically in my life, I've gotten more with women than I have men. And the men that were in my life were young men who were more interested in city breaks away at the weekend, getting on it, and all of a sudden our worlds were completely polarized. You know, I was there, my heart melting because, you know, this 6-month-old girl's putting her hands around my little pinky finger, you know, and that making my world, you know, and they're there thinking, oh, there's this boat that goes down Amsterdam, we get on that, and this, you know, and all of a sudden it just wasn't me at all. I wasn't into it. So I didn't really have any way to connect with people around that kind of thing. And so I started having conversations with a few dads that I'd come across and things, and realised that I wasn't quite alone in that feeling. Also, I was beginning to be aware of gaps in services for men when it come around parenting. At no point did any health person ask me how I was doing, how I was. In fact, even when I raised concerns about my wife, that was just kind of ignored. We were kind of left to go through it on our own, really. We were failed in that first instance, really. And so I was kind of dismayed by the whole thing. And at some point, and I think it was a dad called Samin, who now lives up in Leeds with his daughter, and I think he's engaged with Leeds dads up there. I think he said to me something along the lines of, Matt, you're a bit of a whiz on social media. Why don't you set up a group for dads? And I didn't. Reason being is what I coin now is I was a bit of an idea-y person, a bit of somebody with millions of ideas in my head, a bit of a entrepreneur, but wasn't really a doer.
Yeah.
I'd had a million business ideas in my head and done nothing about any of them. I realise now, actually, in my adult life, that was part of adult ADHD.
Yep.
So I just did nothing with it. And further down the line, I was working with Unlock at that time. Shout out to the boys, Hayden and Ben, if you're out there listening. And Miles came along, my boy, and same problems were still being encountered. Still lacking the services. Nothing had really changed. This is 5 years in between my daughter and my boy now. And I just went, what is going on? Why is this? You know, and now we're seeing a shift in the media about dads needing 6 months time off and all these sort of things. I was having these discussions, having these things, years ago.
Yeah.
You know, because I knew then, I knew exactly then that the way to support the women and the gender pay gap and all those kind of things was to start to empower dads to take more responsibility with the childcare. And so, in doing that, the employers will see the benefits, women see the benefits, and we'll start seeing all those kind of things.
There's a
But
really interesting point there around gender pay gap and the focus of gender pay gap work solely on women, in terms of that's you've got to level up, but actually there's a bit of almost leveling down needed, in that if you really want to crack it, there is a need to make men realise that they can be the carer, they can take time out of their career, they can go part-time, etc., etc. It works both ways, and that's really, really important.
And I think there's a shift in that. Obviously, there's some campaigns out there from the Dad Shift and Elliot Ray with his Parenting Out Loud campaigns. So there's a lot out there, and it's so great to see that somebody's been able to break through and get that message that I was singing like 13 years ago. But yeah, so I was working on a lock and was realizing nothing had really changed at that time, and that voice that had said, "You should do a Facebook group." There was this epiphany moment, and something just went, I'll do it. And I did it.
Yeah.
And within days, scores and scores of people were asking to join. I think within 3 or 4 days, there was a couple of hundred men on there.
So when was that?
That would have been 2015, 2016, something like that.
So we're talking 10 years
Yeah.
from you just starting a Facebook group up on your own to now the Parenting Network. And I mean, describe what the Parenting Network looks like now for people that don't realise, because there will be some people that think it's, just a couple of shops in the Bridge Centre and that's it. But there's a lot more to the Parenting Network now.
There is. I mean, until very recently, people may have heard of the name the Parenting Network and just thought we did sort of stay and play groups.
Yeah.
Which couldn't be further from the truth, actually. There's about 9 different programs, and we're spread across 3 different cities. So to put it into some context, Dad's Club grew into the Parenting Network when we developed the Young Mums Project. And that was in 2017 when the Parenting Network became an organisation. And since coming out of lockdown, we've grown into 9 projects, a team of 50 across 3 cities. We've got projects for young mums. We're the leaders in adverse childhood trauma projects in the city. We are the largest provider of bump and baby services. We're the largest dads group on the South Coast. We've got one of the most busiest baby banks outside of London, which supports about 140 families a month. For those not familiar with the concept of a baby bank, the baby bank works exactly the same way as a food bank, really. You get a referral, you come, and we are able to provide you with some services that your young family might need, such as cots, nappies, toiletries, clothes, anything that a family might need. And it's led us to have, you mentioned our shops in the Bridge Centre. So just over a year ago, we were able to move into the Bridge Centre and create our own family hub, Bridge Hub as we call it. And it was we were already working within the family hubs around the city and some other locations, a few schools. But we needed our space. We needed a place that was ours, where we could do things our way, because our way of working was meeting some resistance within the community in terms of decision makers and council and things. But we knew better.
And it's interesting because obviously I've been in, you've shown me around everything behind the scenes, and I've kind of seen what you've got there, especially, I mean, the baby bank and the storage. But I know that before that, when I first met you, and you were one of the first people that sort of introduced themselves to me when I took over at Shape in Portsmouth, one of the first people I kind of had any contact with. But you were upstairs from us in the Guildhall.
Yeah, a very small office.
And a very small office. And
Yeah.
I find it mind-boggling when I see your current setup to understand how you manage to operate in that small office environment.
So yeah, it was difficult then. We were
Yeah.
already outgrowing that office back then, which was just over a year ago. So we knew we needed to get out of that space. And also the beginnings of the baby bank was there, and that's the third floor. That wasn't any good. It just wasn't fit for purpose anymore. When it was just a small team of 4 before lockdown, and we just needed a space to meet and do our bits and pieces, it was perfect.
Yeah.
And thank you to the Guildhall for hosting us all those years, in those early years of us getting started, Andy and Rachel and the rest of the team, Nick, because it really did give us that space to grow, develop.
Yeah.
But we grew out of that, and within a year of being in the Bridge Centre, we were growing out of that too. We still are growing out of it, because the people of Portsmouth, they're choosing us. We are the people's choice of family support in this city.
Yeah.
12,500 families last year came to us for support. That tells us that what we're doing works.
Yeah.
The baby bank already needs space. And so for a year, we've operated in the Bridge Centre with our hub, which is our family-facing support service where people can come to our Community Connect, which is kind of a triage session where families can come, access support, guidance, advice, signposting, that kind of thing. We have breastfeeding network in there doing bits and pieces. We have speech and language sessions going on in there. Our bump and baby projects going in there. There's some peer support groups that go on within that. So it's not just stay and play in that space. And we realised that that's our family space. But we needed, with some of the work that was starting to develop, our desire to start working with veterans, our trauma work. So April, who is fantastic, and you asked about how we manage all of this. I've got a great team of people around me.
You definitely have.
So April, who came to us when we were doing our Ukraine appeal. So a lot of people will be aware that Portsmouth, when Putin's regime, and I will not say Russia, when Putin's regime invaded Ukraine, myself and Michael Woods from Silent Sky Services, we said, that's fucking rubbish. So I just swore. Have to bleep that one out. We were so incensed, so angry, and we had to do something.
Yeah.
And we decided between the two of us, we were going to take his van to Ukraine. We were going to, with a load of stuff. And that was going to be our mission, and told our staff that's what we were going to do. This got out on social media, and it became the city's operation. And before we knew it, we had lorries, we had trucks, we had completely filled the Guildhall. 2 floors of the Guildhall were full of donations. Tim Peake himself got involved, and during his show gave a shout out to us and said, back these guys. We had Stephen Morgan and his ministers in Parliament all working out borders and bits and pieces. And within a week or two of the invasion, we were taking stuff there. We were raising tens of thousands of pounds. We came back, and everyone had continued to do all of that. And during that time, April had come to us as a volunteer with her own lived experience, not too dissimilar from my own. And quickly found a home within the parenting network. And that is very typical of the team that we've got. And April really wanted to do a project called Embrace, and it was around childhood trauma, or people who identify of having a challenging childhood. And really, we didn't know that at the time, but that's kind of sparked what this new venture, the Forge is, because what we found was when we started telling people that that was the program we were going to do, and it was going to be for under 25s, we were getting a lot of people saying, well, hang on, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 55. I have childhood trauma. What about me? And it was loud. Lots and lots and lots of voices. So April knew instantly this program needed to be bigger.
It's funny. I remember when we first did the work in policing to start rolling out training around adverse childhood experiences, and you immediately realise what a light bulb moment it is, and the impact that can make and the difference. but then the first thing you get hit with and you realise is actually there's a whole bunch of our staff that are now identifying with
Yeah.
this, and we kind of need to deal with that as well.
You don't need to look
No,
far to
no,
find people
you
who have
don't.
experienced it.
You don't. Absolutely, absolutely. So
We to give you an example of that, and I'm sure hopefully the firms don't mind, we'll talk about the Forge later, but in the creation of the Forge, we've been very lucky with the support that we've got.
Yeah.
And amongst those teams of people and businesses, we've already sat down in the evenings with 4 of those tradespeople, giving them essentially our Dad's Chat service or our Embrace service.
Yeah.
So before the doors have even opened, there's a small cohort of people
Yeah.
who have already received support.
yeah, yeah. So we've kind of moved into the Forge. Tell us, because this is exciting, and
It is.
It looks amazing.
It's so
What-
beautiful.
What is the Forge? What's the idea behind it?
So, as I say, so we started realizing we needed a bit of an adult space.
Yeah.
With stuff that's gone in Embrace, and we'd been spitballing some ideas, and we'd noticed that the space was becoming available a few doors down from us in the British Centre. It used to be a takeaway shop, and it was all white box. So we made some inquiries,
Yeah.
and still at that point not quite sure what we were going to do, to be honest. But we were, it was all kind of forming, and people that know us will know that we don't tend to really have a big solid game plan. Our plan is always organic, and it evolves, and we're listening to the people. We're boots on the ground, very much boots on the ground, listening to people, and we will always stay true to what the people of Portsmouth are telling us. And so we're talking to those communities, figuring things out. And again, it was April. April said to me, okay, so we started with Dad's Club. Dad's Club being great. What if we had a space in there for men? And I was resistant for the briefest of moments, because I didn't want to be accused of creating a gentleman's club, a space that's privately for men. And so it took me a moment to calculate that and really think and go, if we're going to do this, then it needs to be the most positive version of a men's health service it can be.
Yeah.
But we also have to play a few cards on this. So we need to make it look like a man cave to attract the men. We have to meet these men where they're at. We need to bring them in, and then we need to be able to do that work with them. But at the same time, it cannot be exclusively for men. It needs to be an adult support hub.
And how I suppose the process of how you've done that is part of the magic of the place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because people have really pulled together to support you, haven't they?
They have, yeah. So we were really fortunate. I mean, we've got a fantastic corporate manager called Joe, who was able to talk to a lot of organisations and put the information out there saying, we got this exciting project and we think you should be involved.
Yeah.
She didn't have to work that hard, to be honest. Instantly, Mountjoy were like, yep, let's have it. We're in, we're all in. And that was after one coffee in the cafe, in the Bridge Centre. They were all over it. And then Nick and his team at Westwood suddenly got in touch and said, we'll have it. That's great. Yeah. And so we had these 2 big companies then saying, we want to do this for you. And we got them together, and this beautiful consortium came about because they each had then other connections, other organisations, other partners, who all came on board. And then we had Hampshire Flag as well, Rod and the team there saying, what are you doing about your signs and the windows? And it's all just come together. And what April and I first thought, there's been a fair bit of it, we thought it was going to be many, many nights of us sitting there up till 11, 12 o'clock at night, making furniture out of pallet woods and all these kind of bits and pieces. But we've had all these tradesmen in for the last 6 weeks, and it's become this it's the vibe. It's deliberately rustic. It's deliberately quirky. It lives up to its name, the Forge.
Yeah.
But instead of forging metal, we're forging and shaping people's lives for the better.
And it's amazing because we kind of referenced the fact that we're in Spark right at the start of the podcast, and that came about in exactly the same way, and by many of those same businesses, and in fact I saw Rod in here a few weeks ago doing more stuff to help Spark out from Hampshire Flag. But you see those businesses, the Mountjoys, the Westwoods, the GRP, who did a lot of work here. This city is just great for those businesses that will step up and support people like yourselves and the Parenting Network in making the really good stuff that you do happen. And it's really, really important, isn't it?
It's fantastic. And you said yourself that you're not sure if these things would happen elsewhere. And I'm not so sure that they would either. I've travelled around the country a little bit and been to various forums and other organisations and charities and things, and it's just not there. It's not the same. I think it was probably about 6 years ago that Portsmouth was labelled the startup capital of the country. And I don't know if we still retain that now. But it's just fantastic. And there is this sense of community. And obviously, you mentioned Spark as a rival. We're not. We're friends.
And I'd never call you rivals.
But
absolutely, both in the same space, doing the same thing, and very much together.
There's some really lovely organisations in the city that work together. The third sector can be a funny space when there's limited refund. There's funds out there for people, and a lot of the commissioners, there's a lot of nepotism that goes on, and there's not a lot of change, and they're funding the same old things. It makes it really harder for those organisations that are trying to push through and say, we're doing the work, why aren't you funding us? We experience that a lot ourselves. A lot of people will think that we're backed by the statutory services. Actually, only one of our programmes, Bump and Baby, is funded by the local authority. Everything else, we have to be really ingenuitive and entrepreneurial about how we make things work.
That's
so
really
we work
important.
in partnership and collaboration with other third sector organisations.
That's really important, because that entrepreneurialism is often missed, or the need for that is missed by people who are very social value, charity focused. They don't realise that what they're entering is almost quite a ruthless business world in terms of the competition for those funding.
It really is.
So in terms of the Forge, what can people expect to see being delivered from the Forge that's different to your other services?
So from the Forge, it will be during the days, there will be the facility to be able to drop in, have a triage service in the same way that our Community Connect does in our Bridge Hub with Hannah, where you can just turn up. You don't have to have a reason. You can just go and have a coffee and in the Bridge Hub, and your kids can play. We offer that same kind of facility in the Forge, but it's an adult space. So you wouldn't really see anyone under the age of 16 in that space, really, apart from a young man that we've kind of taken under our wings at the moment, who's struggling a little bit, and so we've got a bit of a soft spot for him, and so we're trying to help him. But generally speaking, so you can come to that, you can get advice, you can get that signposting support, you can get all of that, including some signposting and drop-in services for uniform services as well. So we've got Neil, who is our military's dad's worker at the moment, who is starting his groups in the Forge on the 17th of June. That will be a peer support group for men. However, if there's any women out there either serving or have served, you are also more than welcome. One of the things about TPN, one of the things about Dad's Club, and particularly at the Forge and the TPN Hub, is that if you need support, if you need help, just bloody come. We're there. We would love to see you. It doesn't matter. The Military Dads Chat may be a service aimed predominantly at military dads, but it's not exclusive. And the same with Dad's Club. These things may be protected groups, but they're not closed groups.
And I think rapidly running out of time.
Sorry.
No. But that is a really important point to kind of probably hang hang this podcast on and as a call to action across all your services, all the different types of need that you support, is if you want help, just walk in.
Yeah. And many are,
Yeah.
we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of families every week in the Bridge Centre. As I said earlier on, they're coming to us. We're seeing communities of families that other services and statutory services just aren't seeing. Because we're there, we're visible. We're smack bang in the two most impoverished wards in our city, Charles Dickens and Fratton. For those that aren't aware, 40% of young people in Portsmouth are considered to be living in abject poverty. Fratton and Charles Dickens are considered to be in the top 10% of impoverished areas in the country. To put that into context, the top 10% is 1,000 neighbourhoods in the entire country. You imagine how many neighbourhoods there are in this country.
Yeah.
And several of those neighbourhoods are in our city. It's been said before, and I say it quite a lot. Portsmouth is a northern town in the south. We have a lot going for us. We've got amazing organisations doing a lot of work. There's a reason for that, because it's needed. And TPN is needed more than ever before. The people are coming to us. We are doing we're doing 10 times the work of our nearest like-for-like service on 40% of their budget.
Yeah.
We're doing the work. We're not getting the level of support that we should be getting. We need, this is more than we can do on our own. We need businesses. We need people. We need funders and commissioners to sit up, take notice, and go, bloody hell, this is where it's at. This is where we need to be. This is where our attention needs to be. And this is a little bit of a Bob Geldof moment. I'm not going to slam your desk now and say, give us your bloody money, which controversially apparently he never said. But I'm saying we need your support, whatever that may look like. And if you need that support, you will get that.
Yeah.
My staff, every contact counts on my staff. And we realise that a lot of families, particularly at the baby bank, a lot of these families have never engaged in services before. They don't know where to turn. We see dual incomes, we see nurses, we see teachers, we see everybody. And they see Parenting Network across there, and they knock on that door and they go, I don't know if you're the people, but I need a chat.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff you're doing. Really, really is. The whole Parenting Network story is fantastic. I think there's probably a part 2 here. Maybe we get April in next time and get her story and a different take on it. But it is fantastic. I can't wait to see the delivery from the Forge. It looks amazing. The stuff the businesses have done there, we probably both can't say this enough, but thank you to all of those businesses that have really supported this amazing venture. But as I tipped you off before we started, we always like to finish our podcasts with a recommendation of somewhere to go or something to do in Portsmouth. Obviously, you've got a range of services you'd like to recommend, but out of work time, where would you go? Where would you recommend?
So you are spoilt for choice in Portsmouth. There's loads of places you can go. And I'm sure that there's those spaces that everyone will mention time and time again. And we know we've got a beautiful seafront and that walk along there is great. However, something that's important to my family, and this goes right back down to those walks during lockdown and all those kind of things that we were allowed to do, is just by the Eastern Road, that Langston Harbour, starting up where that nature reserve is, walking down there. You can take your bikes, you can take your dogs. You've got the water there. I always love being by the sea.
Yeah.
You can see the follies from World War II, a bit of history there. You've got the memorial for the veterans. And we like going down there and over the locks where you can do some crabbing and things. Saw a family last summer there just doing it with ham, and they were bringing out loads of crabs the size of my hand. It was great. And then being able to sit there on that pub, having a Coke, and my kids love the garlic bread, all the cheesy chips and things.
Thatched house.
Thatched house, that's the one. And you can sit there and at low tide, the kids can play. It's beautiful.
Often, I think, the forgotten side of the city in our coastline, but it's a really great little spot. really good one. Makes me want to go down there and check it out now on a nice
Everyone should.
nice day. Matt, it's been great chatting to you. Thank you so much for coming in. Best of luck with everything that the Parenting Network's doing, and particularly the new venture at the Forge. And can't wait to see what happens there.
It's going to be exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This podcast was brought to you by Shaping Portsmouth, working to make Portsmouth the #1 UK city in which to invest, live, learn, work and visit. To find out more, please visit shapingportsmouth.co.uk. This podcast was supported by Spark Community Space and Portsmouth Community Lottery.